Welcome to Amp Life, the #1 podcast for amputees, hosted by an amputee, and brought to you by LAKA Orthotics and Prosthetics, located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm the Brian Moe, the social media advisor for LAKA, and I also happen to be a below-knee amputee. Let's get into today's episode. How's it going, everyone? My guest today is the executive director of the Steps of Faith Foundation and an above-knee amputee, Billy Brimblecom Jr. Billy, welcome to Amp Life.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Billy, you wear a lot of different hats. You're a husband, a father, an actor, a drummer, the executive director of Steps of Faith. Where do you draw your passion and enthusiasm? What keeps you motivated?
Oh, man. Good question. I think that I think that I'm lucky to be able to do things that I care about. And, for me, it was one of those things where growing up, it was just, I had a very clear vision of what I wanted to do. It was just music, period.
Sure.
And that was that. Well, at some point in my career several years ago now, but fairly recently, probably I would say about 10 years ago or so, I had someone point out to me, it was actually my wife's uncle, who's a really brilliant man, that my bigger passion than music, for what he saw, he married us and saw all these friends in our wedding, was people. And I thought, well, that's kind of like, is that a thing? Like my passion is people. Like, who says that?
Right.
But the more I thought about it, I realized that he was right. And so I'm a collaborator by nature, which is part of why I love music. I love music if I'm sitting in my room by myself as a kid listening to Van Halen or whatever, right?
Right, sure.
But or in my car as a man now. But at the same time, music's a team sport. I was never an athlete. And it was one of the things so I love creating, and that's what I think it's one of the things that has made me passionate about music and acting. It's theater is the most collaborative of the arts. And all that to say, that people piece is really my job in Steps of Faith. Really, my job is the people piece. So it's just, it just was kind of like clear that music was the thing. And then there was a period where maybe music isn't the thing. And then it's like, oh, and then when Steps of Faith came up, it was like, oh, this is the thing now.
Sure,
and so
right.
It's like, I really care about that. And then obviously, my passion, enthusiasm, I remember you mentioned my family. I mean, that's just kind of, that's my heart right there, of course.
Right.
I feel very lucky to have a family and to have a beautiful wife and 2 incredible kids. So I don't, a long way around to answer the question, but I just kind of feel like, fortunately for me, it's always, things have just been really clear,
Right.
Yeah.
Do you think you're in one of those positions that some of us are fortunate enough to get in, where you end up not having a job so much, but you're really just living and doing the things that you're passionate about?
The short answer, yeah. All that to say, there are many aspects to my job with Steps of Faith, much like when I was a musician full time, but I'll speak for now with Steps of Faith, which is very much a full-time thing. I mean, the other stuff is, other than my family, is kind of just extracurricular and kind of every now and then at this point, it's kind of episodal. But yes, I feel like my job, my mission in life, other than being, a good father, husband, friend, whatever, is to create Steps of Faith to last beyond the person creating it. And so, really, I'm just trying to create my exit strategy with this thing. And hopefully I don't die doing that. But,
right.
We're just 4 years in at this point. So, my point being, I think so. But also, my job is, there are things about it I love, and there are things about it that I hate.
Right.
It's just, I think that's any job. So I feel like it's more than my job. It's kind of my mission,
Sure, right.
At least for now. I feel my mission is to get Steps of Faith to where it no longer needs the training wheels. It's just like fly free. And then I don't know what then, but that's kind of what I'm supposed to do now. But it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure.
Albeit very rewarding.
Right.
Times, but yeah.
You mentioned being in your room as a kid listening to Van Halen. When do you think you first realized your passion for music and specifically to play the drums?
Yeah. Early on. I mean, I was always a listen to the radio kid.
Sure.
Like in kid, like grade school, was always into music. And I didn't start, my dad listened to the radio a lot and he was a big music fan, had a big record collection. And I had a musical family somewhat, but I wasn't exposed to it a whole lot. Like my dad played, several different instruments, including the drums when he was a kid. And my grandmother played the guitar and piano and whatnot on the other side. A lot of family members. I did see my uncle Mike would sing and play guitar in like a country band.
Okay.
And I got to see him play a lot when I was a kid, and I always thought that was really cool. But I didn't. So growing up in the 80s, thus mentioning Van Halen, the saxophone was a very big instrument in 80s rock and pop.
Yeah.
So I had a period where I really wanted to play the saxophone, and that was in 5th grade.
Okay.
Would start band in grade school. That was the first time I'd really attempted to play an instrument other than banging on pots and pans and that kind of classic tale. I did all that.
Sure.
They put you on the clarinet, which is a whole other story. And so that, it's like, anyway. So needless to say, I played clarinet for 1 year. And then over that summer decided I want to play the drums. And so, I was like 11 or something, like 10.
Okay.
And then the cool thing was once I started playing the drums, then music started kind of clicking in a different way. Like the records that I was listening to at the time I started trying to play music. So at the time I started trying to like emulate, just like a kid talking, you say the things you hear. So the things I was listening to at the time I started to play the drums, which I already had a friend who played guitar. Like we had a band before I had a drum set. I just had a snare.
Nice.
So those records are, will always be really special to me and whatnot. So yeah, I was about 10 or 11 when I really started to get into the drums. So,
sure.
Yeah.
So I mentioned at the top, you're an actor. You have performed off Broadway. You performed at the Kennedy Center. You were in the movie Jayhawkers. You had the lead in the short Haunted, and you've appeared in an episode of Girl Boss with Britt Robertson, which, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know, is available on Netflix. What led you to acting?
Wow. Well done. Let's see. So I guess I have an IMDb. Yeah. So, I think that was just kind of like, I just was into performing, that was, again, the music piece and the theater piece was collaborating, but I mean, I was also a ham as a kid, and some would say still am.
Sure.
So, I just have always enjoyed just connecting to people, and I've always enjoyed performing for people and entertaining people. And I mean, I remember being in a play, I did the talent show when I was in grade school. Before I played an instrument, I remember doing a lip sync, which was a big deal in the 80s. There was a whole, now they have the Jimmy Fallon lip sync battle, but there was a whole thing in the 80s. There was this TV show called Putting on the Hits.
Oh yeah. I remember that show.
Putting on the Hits. Yeah. And they would like rate you on, I remember one of the things they'd rate you on was originality while lip syncing a song that you did not write or originally record. So I don't know how that worked, but nonetheless, I did a lip sync routine in, 2nd grade to a Rick Springfield song. And then did a bunch of, another one in 4th grade and all that kind of thing. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of those things where I was in a play in 6th grade that I really liked. It was a comedic role. And I did a lot of theater in high school and started doing some improv comedy and stuff in high school, and actually started working at a professional improv comedy club called Comedy Sports in Kansas City.
Okay.
When I was in high school, like I auditioned when I was in high school and, got hired. And some would say, to bring it full circle, that is ultimately what led me to the girl boss thing.
Okay, sure.
And I will only say, without going through all of the things that you just mentioned, which, by the way, the Haunted thing was a student film that somebody shot, but I did as an adult, and it was one of those things. No disrespect to those guys; it was a good experience.
Right.
Trying out my range, right? But the Kay Cannon is the showrunner and the creator of the Girl Boss show for Netflix. Okay. And she is a great friend. And a very long story short, I met her through my experience as an improv comedy guy.
Okay.
So I've known her for 20 years. But anyway, that's kind of how that whole came up. That's a different podcast.
Take me back to just a little before your journey as an amputee and a cancer survivor begins. You had formed Blackpool Lights in the fall of 2004. At what point in 2005 did you discover the tumor was in your left leg? And then to add on to that, what point did the doctors tell you that your leg would have to be amputated?
Wow. Yeah. So that was a really weird year, but really, to answer your question, couple years. I was in this band called The Start, which was kind of like was doing all the things I always wanted to do in music that I hadn't done yet. I was 25, 26 at that point, and had toured and whatnot. But The Start was ended up just was a really unhappy time in my life, and I ended up leaving that band, and in retrospect, that was my thing, not theirs. But we did some cool stuff together, and went, toured with The Offspring and all sorts of played Wembley Arena. It was great. So Blackpool Light, but they were an LA band, and I was living in Kansas City, so I was just gone all the time.
Wow.
But it was like a year. It was like 13 months or so of my life that I was in that band, in and out of off the road and home. So Blackpool Lights started. 6 months after I left The Start or whatever, which was great because that was like, okay, we all live in Kansas City. I know Jim, and he's really talented, who's the singer and main songwriter of the band. Was in this band, the Get Up Kids. And then the other two guys originally in the band had been in my first touring band, which is a power pop band called The Creature Comforts. Sure. And so kind of like, these are my brothers with this guy we knew, and it was just this great thing. So I love that you tied Blackpool Lights into, set the scene of this period of your life, because it really was jarring. I mean, I think anytime you would be diagnosed with cancer and get news like I had, it would be jarring, but it was one of those things where, like, no kidding. Yeah. Blackpool started, what'd you say, fall of 2004, right? So we played our first show in early 2005, played our first concert, and a week later I was diagnosed with cancer.
Oh, wow.
So, and this was not like a hobby band. I mean, this was right. Like, we weren't making a living yet, but that was the plan, right?
Sure.
At that band, we were not making a living. Anyway, a week later I was diagnosed with cancer. I'd had this pain in my leg stemming several months after a really terrible car accident. That was in 1999. I'd had it looked at a couple times. The pain, would go away for months on end. Whole long story, but basically the pain started happening more often at a higher pain level and would last longer. So I eventually went to a neurologist. This is not a neurological issue, this pain in your leg. Have you had a ultrasound? No, I haven't. Anyway, so I ultrasound. Okay, yeah, you got something in there. I did all these tests. And so this started in January of 2005 is when I first went to the neurologist. Blackpool Lights played that first show in the meantime, and then I was diagnosed with cancer. And so that's when they discovered the tumor was early 2005. And then at one point did the doctors tell me it was basically so I knew before the final test.
Okay.
So I'd done all these tests, and then I met with an orthopedist before, who now I can credit with being the man who one of the couple guys that saved my life, literally.
Right, sure.
But he ran through all of the things that it could be and what would happen if it was this. So it could be this. And if that's the case, we'll do this. And so the last thing he said, and this was before a biopsy that they were doing, which was the final test. And he said, and I said, okay, so is that it? And he said, so what? I said, do I need to, what about? And he interrupted me. He said, the only reason you would lose your leg would be to save your life. So do the biopsy, find out it's cancer. This was, I started treatment, again, it was kind of the beginning of the year. I feel like I want to say I could be wrong about this, but I feel like it was like my first day or first week or whatever of chemo was like St. Patrick's Day.
Okay.
Something like that. Something like that. Anyway. So to answer your question about when the doctors told me I had known that amputation was a possibility, and I knew that we were getting close to that time. So that was actually in July of that year of 2005. And it was actually on the eve, kind of a whole other story, but on the eve of my appointment where I was to go in to meet with my orthopedist for him to say, here's what we should do.
Right.
Somehow I believe it was, I expressed to my mother, who worries as a full-time job, unfortunate inherited trait to some extent on my end, but she'd called the doctor and I don't know how she got this information out of him. I don't know what kind of HIPAA laws they broke to tell her this, but so then she called my best friend, who's kind of like my brother, and then he actually came over to my house, to my apartment, and he told me.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and I remember it really, really, really well. So then I was kind of prepared anyway, kind of. And then he had told me, and then the next morning I went in for that appointment.
Sure.
Like, okay. So, yeah.
So
long answer to a very short but very important question.
Sure. So I always ask people this. All of us respond differently when we get that news that, we have to lose our leg. Like you, mine was to save my life. I had a little bit less time. I had about 60 seconds to think about it. Beforehand. But what's going through your mind when the doctor delivers this news?
Yeah, I think that I'd kind of, in being so worried about it happening, I think I had kind of worked out. I had just been trying to kind of work out. I knew people walk with prosthetic legs.
Sure.
I knew that was a thing, even though I didn't know anyone personally. I remember watching this documentary about this tour that Paul McCartney had done. And because I have warm blood in my veins, I'm a Paul McCartney and Beatles fan, as everyone should be to some extent. Nonetheless, I remember watching this documentary, and at the time he was married to that woman, Heather Mills.
Right.
I knew had lost a leg, and while hers was below the knee, and I didn't know above knee, below knee, any of that, but I knew that I might lose my leg. I just remember like, she's fine. They're like hopping off helicopters and stuff. And,
absolutely.
So I just thought, okay, well, that'll be fine. I was just worried about, honestly, I was worried about playing the drums.
Yeah. And
I was worried about running around and playing with kids that I hope to have someday. So I guess how I responded to the news was, I was really sad, of course,
right.
And I just was like, wait, what? When my buddy Tim was telling me. And then I remember getting, pretty emotional when that news was delivered by my doctor, but I trusted him 100% and knew that I was really lucky in that the doctor that my primary care doctor happened to recommend I go to, the specialist, this orthopedist, who happened to be the guy that was local to me where I was in Kansas City, also literally happens to be one of the best in the business in the country. Like, people fly in from all over the place to meet with him. So I was really lucky to have that. I didn't really need to seek a second opinion. So my whole thing was just, to answer your question, was just kind of like, what do I got to do to get through this?
Sure.
What does this mean? What are we up against? How long is this going to take? Just to give me the details, So that was kind of it,
Sure.
And then, as you probably know, and anybody who's listening lost a limb, then there's a whole myriad of emotions that continue to happen for a long time.
Absolutely.
But initially that was kind of the deal. It was like, shocked, but also not, because I kind of expected it. And then, incredibly sad and kind of just like, I don't know, defiant was the word. But I remember was just real matter of fact. Like I had to just call people and tell them because of how it would affect my life, just short-term logistically.
Right.
And I remember calling a couple different people and having these really emotional conversations on their end. I remember calling my friend Brian, who was the bass player at Blackpool Lights at the time, and kind of telling him, because he was like, so how'd the appointment go today? And or he called me, I guess. And I remember telling him, and I was like, but here's the deal. We had kind of a timeline worked out of how things were going to go with the band.
Right.
Knowing I was sick, not knowing what was going to happen. I just remember telling him, and I said, this will not affect the timeline. And being emotional when I said that, but I'm happy to say I was right.
Nice.
Yeah.
So from the time you, from the time you have your amputation, what kind of recovery did you have, physically recovery? How long until you were up and walking again on your prosthesis?
At the time, I felt like it was a long time. I felt like it was forever. But in retrospect now, in particular, knowing so many other amputees' stories from the people that we work with, it was, thankfully, no time at all. So my surgery was August 5th, 2005.
Okay.
I was in the middle of chemotherapy, I took a couple weeks off for my, immune system to recover. Then they did the surgery. Then there was a couple more weeks to try to get my immune system to heal, my leg.
Right.
And then started chemo again. The surgery was kind of in the middle of that process. So surgery August 5th, I was starting to begin working with the prosthesis.
Okay.
October 20 something, October.
Okay.
Yeah. Like end of October that year. So, but I mean, and I was, and then I had a cane and I was off the cane, by Christmas.
Nice.
So in retrospect, really fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're the second amputee drummer that I've heard of. The first, Rick Allen from Def Leppard, who lost his left arm in 85, I think.
Yeah.
Was there ever a doubt in your mind that you would play drums again? And on the back side of that, are you the first lower limb amputee drummer to make a successful comeback? That's a mouthful to say.
Yes, that is a lot to say. Yeah. So, I had worked out, I don't know if I said this earlier, but I thought I'd kind of worked out the mechanics of how the drumming would work before I'd even lost the limb. And then once I realized, where I would be losing it and how all that worked. Well, actually it's like, even with the knee, it wouldn't really matter. So yeah, I guess I had worked out how, whether it was above knee or below knee, I just knew like, okay, well, my hip will work and then that can move my leg, and it's my left leg and that moves the hi-hat, which is really just, you put your foot on a pedal that makes the hi-hat just go up and down. That's all it does. I mean, it's a little more nuanced than that, but
sure.
So, it was kind of like, if I was to lose a limb, it was kind of the easiest one to still make it work and have it not affect it as much. So to the listener, I feel like my drumming was, I'm very happy to say, pretty seamless. Like, okay. I was able to make it sound like it did before pretty quickly, but it took a very large physical effort to do this thing that I used to just like move my foot kind of.
Right. Right.
Like, it used to require very little physical effort.
Right.
So I wasn't too worried. I mean, I was concerned about it, but I feel like I'd figured out how I'd be able to do it, and I was right, thankfully. And then it's funny that you mentioned Rick Allen, because so this is kind of a crazy story, but when I was in the hospital, so I was in there a couple days before the surgery, okay, to prep and do all this stuff. And then I was there, probably, I don't know, a week or whatever afterwards. And while I was there, like the night before the surgery, Def Leppard was actually playing Kansas City.
Oh, wow.
So a friend of mine had this idea. What if we were able to get, the drummer for Def Leppard, who was, by the way, I got to say, one of those cassette tapes, one of those records that I was obsessed with, that was really important to me in 6th grade when I was 11.
Right. Yeah.
My first public performance on the drums was a terrible version, I think with no vocals, of a Def Leppard song. It was like 2 guitars and a drummer. But anyway, so long story short, that friend tells another friend this, and then that friend happened to work for the radio station that was sponsoring the concert. It was helping promote the concert. And so they thought he was going to come to the hospital, and that didn't work out or whatever. But he did call me. Rick Allen did call me.
Nice.
He called me on the phone 2 days in a row, because the first day he called me, I was like right out of the recovery room. I was back in my room, but I was so dry. I was like, oh my gosh. And he was like, all right, mate, I'll call you tomorrow when you're not so sedated. And sure enough, he did. He did. I talked to him, for a couple minutes that day, and I talked to him the next day. And it was really encouraging, and it's kind of like what we talked about in retrospect. I remember thinking, like, let's just talk about Def Leppard. Let's talk about music. It was like healthy eating and like alkaline diet and all of these things, which are very important to me now. But at the time, it was just this really fun, incredibly kind of extraordinary experience that happened simultaneously with the worst experience of my life. Right.
Yeah.
So it makes a great story. And we have several mutual friends. So we've been circling each other now since 2005, communicating through friends, but have not talked directly since then. True story.
Wow.
I've got a couple good friends. So I love Rick, even though I've only spoken to him on the phone twice, and it was in 2005. And then to answer your question about lower limb drummer to make a successful comeback, I know a few others.
Okay.
I did some cool stuff with music and whatnot, but was never, famous per se. But when I was also in the hospital, I met a gentleman through an email who has remained a friend named Mike Carter, who works for some drum companies. He's kind of like a sales guy and whatnot now, but a fantastic drummer that was in Florida. He was a left leg above the knee drummer.
Sure.
So we've stayed in touch. And then there's a lot of people I could name, but also I would say, there's a gentleman by the name Cactus Mosier, lifelong nickname Cactus.
Sure.
Cactus is one of my favorite people in the world and a great friend. And we were I asked that we be put in touch by a mutual friend when Cactus lost his left leg above the knee in a motorcycle accident a few years ago. And he has been a drummer in the country world forever. He was in Highway 101, which was a huge deal in the 80s. And he's the drummer and band leader, record producer, and husband to Winona Judd now. And so Cactus is fantastic. And he was back playing drums way before, like right away, like kind of too soon, was on the road. Kind of set him back a little bit with the walking, but he's fine now. But I would just mention him as well as lower extremity, left leg AK, just ruling, so there's others out there. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned playing the drums, and you mentioned with the top hat. Have you ever used your prosthesis for the kick pedal at all when you're drumming?
Fortunately, I was never a double bass drum, double kick drum guy.
Okay.
So there was one period where I had where I sold there was this small window of time where vintage drums, I was at the age where I didn't think vintage drums were cool. And I had this incredible vintage 60s Ludwig kit. It was my first drum set that my dad got out of the newspaper. Oh, wow. It was like, $200 or whatever. Where I traded that in towards the big, the black with the chrome and the rack. Oh yeah. Stuff. And I had 2 bass drums, but, it was this small window. And then like a year later, I was like, this drum set sucks. Why did I do that? And so all that to say, no, I never, other than like, I was never really like a metal guy. So there, and not that double kick drum is only relegated to metal, but
right.
The music I was into, double kick drum stuff just wasn't, this is music nerd talk here, but it just wasn't really like applicable. Like there wasn't something I listened to that I was trying to emulate. I was, Led Zeppelin and the Black Crowes and bands like that. And the John Bonham from Led Zeppelin did these things that originally when people first heard Led Zeppelin, they thought were double bass drum, but he just was doing it with one foot. And I just thought like, that's what I'm going to do. And, on a good day, was able to emulate that stuff. So again, so much more nuance to the bass drum versus the hi-hat. My left leg was always just been the hi-hat. So
nice.
It worked out. Yeah.
Are you still involved in any studio work today?
On very, very, very rare occasion. I lived in Nashville, Tennessee for 7 years, and that's where Steps of Faith started. I moved there from Kansas City, and I've moved back to Kansas City now.
Okay.
Just in this last August. But so I was doing studio work in Kansas City, and then I moved to Nashville in 2009, and then did quite a bit of studio work there.
Okay.
Played on a lot of records and had, but you know, it wasn't full-time studio. I was still doing a lot of touring and whatnot.
Okay.
So all that to say, I did a session when I was on a trip to Nashville in the fall. I like squeezed in a recording session with a friend of mine that
Nice.
was, you know, like, oh, you're in town. Can you come play on these songs? I was like, I actually am free tonight. I can do that. So that was in November. So not really. Well, you know what? I actually recorded with a friend recently. I take that back. I played on one song on a Sunday afternoon with some old friends, and I had to cancel where he needed me for like a whole day. So yes, but I just don't really have the time. I mean, It doesn't mean I want to. I would love to just go spend the day with my friends, just playing in the studio. But that'll happen.
Sure.
Yeah.
So when you became an amputee, I mean, obviously you knew you were going to need a prosthesis that, let me back up, not just a prosthesis, but one that would allow you to live an active life, continue to be a drummer. When I was reading your story, I read that you raised over $30,000 for your first prosthesis. The motivation to me here is obvious, but how did you begin such a massive campaign to do that?
Well, I will say that was done for me.
Okay.
Is the short answer there. But yeah, you know, a lot of times the words that were thrown, I know so much more about, you know, the world of prosthetics now as you might imagine, just from being an amputee longer, but also for my job as such a fake, you know.
Right.
So at the time, I remember I was given what was called a temporary prosthesis, which I learned to walk in and was on the road touring, playing in and everything. But, you know, it didn't quite fit right. My weight was fluctuating. And, you know, I mean, when I was on chemo, I lost 10 pounds in 4 days once, you know. It was like, yeah, that didn't make my doctors happy, but that happens, you know. So all that to say, the plan all along, I mean, I was 28, you know, and was just an active guy and, you know, as high of a K level as you can be, to talk some industry inside term there. I think Blue Cross says there's no such thing as a K4 AK, which is not true. They say K3 active, I believe. Yeah,
I think so.
So thank you, Blue Cross, who's paid for my prostheses. I'll go with K3 active. But yeah, it was all that to say, you know, and this kind of goes to a legislative piece, you know, this is the people who should make the decision on what prosthetic devices an amputee needs for their body and their life is the prosthetist and the amputee.
Right.
Period.
Absolutely.
No one that works for a healthcare provider, no one in Washington, unless they're a prosthetist.
Right.
So all that to say, I needed a C-leg, you know, microprocessor above the knee prosthesis. And in 2006, at that point, my insurance would only cover half of it. It is a $60,000 device.
Right.
And so thus the $30,000. So I happened to be having lunch with my great friend to this day, Corey Rittmaster, right after the appointment where they're like, okay, great. Here's what you're going to get. And say, awesome. But your insurance is only going to cover half of it. You got to figure out how to come up with the other 30 grand. And I just remember telling him that. And he was like, and there were a couple smaller fundraisers that had happened for me. Even though I had health insurance, I had a very high deductible money that was raised that definitely was spent on medical things while I was sick. And so, you know, at this point I was a few months out of chemo and everything and kind of released back into life. But all that to say, my friend Corey was like, well, maybe we can help you raise the money. Let me get back to you. So long story short, my friend Corey, with a lot of friends that really pretty much brought together what to me felt like everyone I'd ever known and everyone in Kansas City and all these people I didn't know. We raised actually $40,000 in one night. And so, you know, that's just friends, a lot of people, but also friends in high places. I mean, you know, we had my friend when my band played, which was cool, which we thought would be like we were touring at that point, you know, that was like kind of here's what your money is doing, you know, which is kind of a theme we continue today in the fundraising. That was really the seed that planted really everything for Steps of Faith, raising money for someone who didn't have it that needed a prosthesis, right? So, but, my friend Jason Sudeikis is one of my best friends, and, he's an actor and was on Saturday Night Live, and he was like kind of famous at that time.
Right.
In 2006, he'd been on SNL a couple years and whatnot. And so Jason performed at the event with a lot of old friends. Anyway, yeah. So those guys did that for me.
Nice.
Yeah.
With that outpouring of support that was shown to you, how do you then transition, and what was the genesis for the Steps of Faith Foundation? Where did that begin, and how did that get started?
Yeah, good question. So that was definitely in my heart. I remember, that was just such an emotional weekend, doing those two events that raised all that money. And it was at the Record Bar. It was a great little rock and roll club in Kansas City. And I remember the next day telling my, I guess she would have been my girlfriend at that time, who's now my wife. Wouldn't it be cool if we did this again in a year? But made it a fundraiser and gave the money towards a cause that is like this.
Sure.
So, but that was 2006. It wasn't until the beginning of 2013 where I was struggling musician, come off a great year where I worked a ton, and then I was going through this big period where over the holidays the phone didn't ring as a freelance musician. My wife was pregnant and had our first child 6 weeks early, which he was fine, but that was incredibly scary and traumatic.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And he was in the hospital for 10 days or so in the NICU, and I was kind of starting to look for a new job, like a new career. And no paid maternity in Tennessee. I don't know how we made it. In retrospect, I was in the process, I believe, of getting a new socket, if memory serves.
Okay.
And my prosthetist in Nashville, Eric Kimsey, said, tell me what kind of cancer you had again. Hey, I got this patient. I was getting ready to leave. I got this patient I'm seeing next who just lost his leg, and he's just getting fitted, going through some cancer stuff. Maybe you can talk to him for a second on your way out and give him some encouragement or whatever. And I was like, dude, I would love to talk to that guy. I feel like that's why that happened to me. I only have like a couple conversations like this a year. Please ask me to do this more. Oh, okay. Here he is. And so I went and talked to the guy, talked to him for like 5 minutes. He's in there with his wife and his kids. And I remember leaving that day and really just was like praising the Lord, that I was able to, I'd had conversations like that before, but something about that one was different. And it was
sure.
special. And I just could see the hope in his eyes. And I just remember saying that I was just so thankful that I was able to speak that language. I know what you're going through. This will get better, kind of thing. And so, and I went home and told my wife that, and I said, I wish that could be my job. Well, I went back to my next appointment the next day, and I told Eric all of what I just said to you. And he said, well, maybe it could be. And so long story short, he ended up introducing me to the gentleman who owned the company at the time, who was his boss, Rob Pittman. And Rob and I had a few different conversations. And then ultimately we had a conversation where we were talking about working together and that kind of thing. And he explained to me that he had a 501c3 in place. He had the IRS nonprofit determination set. We had 501c3 status. And he'd been trying to get a nonprofit off the ground to do that, to get prosthetics for amputees that couldn't afford them, uninsured, typically, amputees, for like 4 years. But he was a busy CEO guy running this company in the successful regional prosthetic chain. And so he didn't have anybody to actually run the organization as a nonprofit. So it'd been around for 4 years, $0, zero in, zero out, just doing nothing really. And so he offered me the job. So I joked that he pretty much like tossed me the keys to a car that didn't run and said, see what you can do with that.
Wow.
So, yeah.
What are some of the core principles and values of Steps of Faith?
That's a great question. Yeah. I mean, we have a tagline that has not been in a lot of our messaging lately, but we're going to get back to, which is moving amputees forward. So I think that the core principles and values tie to our mission statement, which talks about providing prosthetic care, hope, and comfort to amputees needing financial support. And all of this is very specific. and there strategically, the hope and comfort piece. I know that that's what I was providing to that gentleman that my prosthetist asked me to talk to.
Right.
This guy's been through this. He's okay. That's comforting. That gives me hope.
Absolutely.
Okay. And also when I was sick, the word forward really stuck with me. So I really wanted to use that word. And fun story, I remember telling, so again, back to Jason Sudeikis, his whole family I'm close with. And I remember saying how my first show back after I lost my leg that I'd intended to, I should make it sounds kind of cheesy to say, but it was just kind of these motivational things to myself, make a t-shirt that says forward, because that was just my mantra, and wear it on stage. And so the night of that show, actually, it was a Saturday, and there was an SNL that Jason was in the cast at that time, and he also was wearing a shirt that said forward at the end at the good nights. And so that was pretty important. So cool story. So anyway, the core values are moving amputees forward and providing hope and comfort. And the name Steps of Faith, a frequently asked question is, so Steps of Faith are you a Christian organization? And I always say we are not a Christian organization, nor are we a religious nonprofit by determination.
Sure.
I full disclosure, I am a follower of Jesus myself and a Christian man. The word Christian can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people, but what it's supposed to mean is someone who follows Jesus. And it's not about the don'ts, but it's about the freedoms of the do's.
Right. And absolutely.
So all that to say, the word Steps of Faith, it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But it also is a common turn of phrase. But to me, the value of that is the hope piece. Have faith that there is hope, that there's somebody that can help you, and just keep going, keep moving forward, because we are here. We are an option for you.
Sure. Tell me about. I was thinking about this, and I didn't include this. And when I sent you some questions, tell me about the logo for Steps of Faith. How did you come up with the logo?
Yeah, so I have a great friend who happens to be a world-class illustrator and graphic designer and branding guy, and just word genius is thrown around a lot these days. But I think it's fair to apply to him. Named Micah Smith. Micah Smith. Is his first initial.
Okay.
And I believe it's amicahsmith.com. Anyway, he's done T-shirts for Wilco and posters for Ice Cube and the TED Talks, everything.
Right. Yeah.
Who happened to be my friend. And so I went to Micah when we were trying to create a logo. And it was important to me that it didn't look like your typical prosthetic company logo, and I didn't want it to look like, I don't know. This is the creative guy in me. I just wanted it to look a certain way, and I knew while I'm not like a visual, my artistic stuff is music and in acting or whatever. I knew a lot of things I didn't want, so I just went to Micah with it, and there were all these, and the flame. Again, that's another people like, Steps of Faith Christian organization. Well, the flame. Well, the reason that the flame is often attributed with faith-based things is it's hope.
Right.
Name means hope, people. So anyway, that's that. Yeah, Micah came up with some designs, and they were all awesome, and that's it. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Tell me about the $10 toast. I saw during the campaign one of the pictures on I think I saw it on Instagram was an actual piece of toast. Tell me about the $10 toast campaign.
Yeah. So this time last year. There's this thing that we were just talking about this. There's this thing that's in many cities around the country. It's called Giving Day America. And it's basically just kind of like a big pledge drive for 24 hours. And in Nashville, where we were based at the time, it's called the Big Payback. And each of them in their cities, they kind of collectively run through a community foundation, which community foundation is kind of like a donor advised funds kind of thing, do a lot of great things. And I will say in particular, the community foundation of Middle Tennessee is who puts on the Big Payback, and they're incredible. We were a small nonprofit. We had never participated in the Big Payback. So I was like, we got to find a way to stand out, because the advantage of doing this where the money runs through the community foundation is that they have all these sponsors with these things. And there's all these like matching grants and incentives and, all of these awesome things. And so, we have a fantastic guy on our board of directors who's our marketing director. He's on the board, but he runs a marketing agency in Los Angeles, and Andrew Lose. And he and I just were talking, and we kind of whittled it out. It was mainly his idea. I kind of changed the name, but he had the overall concept. And we kind of came up with it together as a way to, I hesitate to even say it, but I mean, obviously, the Halley's Comet of social media fundraising was the Ice Bucket Challenge, right?
Right.
That'll happen again in 75 years. But if we could do something that would catch on at all, that would be cool. And it did. And so that was the thing. And so it was a big payback, and it was just a day. And so we just thought it would be this fun way for people to like take a picture and, cheers and tag us and then donate $10. I mean, most people, if you have an iPhone or a smartphone, could probably part with $10, and so maybe we could raise, a little bit of money from a lot of people.
Right.
And we did. So with a matching grant, we ended up overall all in about 2 days, brought in about $10,000. So
nice.
That's how it got started. We decided if it's viral, let's give it more time than a day. So we used the $10 toast for all of April since it was Limb Loss Awareness Month, to try to have it really catch on. And, I will say it kind of almost did about the same, but even though it was over the course of a month, but it was really, really great. And so we did it for all of April, and we just ended it yesterday was the big payback. And it all went really, really great. It's like nonprofits, man, it's a business that really nonprofit is a disservice, really.
Right.
But it's a business that helps people and fights injustice. And how you get your income is through donations. And so it's kind of always, anytime you can have a new way to talk about trying to ask people for money, that's a good thing. And so that's what we've been doing since the beginning of April, and it went really well. And we raised a very nice amount of money and had some great press in Kansas City, and we're really thankful. So yeah. Awesome. So the actual piece of toast first came from my smart aleck friend, Corey Rittmaster, who was the very guy I mentioned earlier that actually organized the $30,000 fundraiser for me in 2006. So that was him being funny with the piece of toast. So
Nice. As a father, what are some things that you feel, some of the lessons that children should be taught as they encounter not just amputees, but anyone who has some sort of obvious difference about them?
That's a great question. Yeah. My kids are 4 years old and 2 years old, and they know that I have a robot leg now. Even my 2-year-old. And my son, I feel like not that long ago, maybe a year or so ago, one time when I had my leg off before bed, realized that, oh, wait, this is different. So, excuse me. I think the short answer is, I think that they'll just grow up with a broader perspective of people with disabilities, and a deeper empathy for those folks. I don't really identify. I don't often feel like a handicap. Let me rephrase that. I don't feel like a handicapped person. I don't often identify like a handicapped person because I don't feel like one. Right. But at the same time, I am. Without the prosthesis, unless I have crutches, I'm hopping.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And so, I'm just really lucky. So I feel like, I think it's, I think the more empathy we can have as human beings, especially in this day and age, which is unfortunate to say, but I think the better. I think in particular for people with disabilities, where it's completely beyond your control. And so, I think that that's, it has and will continue to be good for my kids to just kind of grow up with that perspective. I think the more perspective, that's, wisdom comes with that. I just think that's a good thing. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that you recently participated with the Amputee Coalition on their Hill Day to speak to legislatures on Capitol Hill about issues that face the limb loss community. What was that experience like? And did you find that the legislatures on Capitol Hill were open to discussing these issues?
It was a great experience. That was just last week. I say weird only because I've never experienced anything like that.
Right.
I'd played DC a lot as a musician, but even just a few years ago, but I'd not been to all the Capitol buildings and inside, where everyone's walking a million miles an hour and wearing a suit and frowning, business. It was a really great experience, and I'm really thankful to, just as a person, but also, as a representative of a organization that helps amputees, just to be involved with the Amputee Coalition of America.
Sure.
I really kind of owe it all to them. They set all of it up. Yes, I'm going to go, count me in. We paid our way to be there and everything, but they set up the meetings.
Nice.
The meetings were with, your own representatives from where you're from. And so I went in tandem and worked as a team we were the only two guys from Kansas, with Brendan Allen, who lives in Lawrence, Kansas, which is about 45 minutes away from Kansas City, where the University of Kansas is located. And I live in Kansas City. So Brendan and I all of our meetings were together. And we had 4 meetings throughout the day. And we met with staffers, like on the schedule, we were meeting with, 2 Congress, 2 senators,
right?
But it was all staffers. We met one of the Congress people at the end of the day, but the meeting was not with her. But all of that to say, we were told that by the coalition that could be the case, and that doesn't mean it's not effective,
right?
So surely it would have been a slightly different conversation if it was, there was no middleman there. But
right.
Most of these folks were. Really educated young folks that knew what was the deal. So all that to say, it was a great experience. They were very open to it. Fortunately, most of the things that we were telling them how we felt about and how we wanted them to represent us, they were already on to. And they're like, oh, we're in on this.
Sure.
So, and that's just about insurance fairness and basically just the rights of amputees. And, so it was a good experience.
Sure.
And I'll do it again.
Good. As you're aware, we're facing a very uncertain future with regards to healthcare. The day we're recording this is actually the day that the House is voting, on the healthcare measure. What would you like to see, just from your perspective, what would you like to see ideally put in a healthcare plan specifically for the amputee community?
There's a lot to it, but the fact that I don't have the names of all of them in front of me, but the basically, like I said earlier, the people who should be able to make the decision about what prosthetic device an amputee needs is the prosthetist, along with the patient, period. And money should not factor into that. I understand it's all a business, right?
Right.
But when it comes to healthcare, money should not factor into that. I shouldn't have had to raise the $30,000 for the sea leg. Fortunately, I will say, thank God, like I joked earlier, I've received 2 sea legs since then, and my insurance has covered those. I have a very high deductible.
Yeah.
But, my insurance has covered those, thankfully. I just got a new one in December, and I'm walking better than I ever have.
Nice.
So, pre-existing condition stuff. I mean, amputees shouldn't have to fight to get what they need. You know, and that's really the core. That's maybe the thing I left out of the core values of Steps of Faith. It's about injustice, man.
Right.
If someone has lost a limb and they are a good candidate for a prosthesis, not everyone can because of where their amputation is or their body or whatever. But if the only thing standing in their way is money, and that person's confined to a wheelchair or a walker and can't be living their life to the fullest, that is injustice.
Right.
And I will fight, whether I'm working with Steps of Faith or not, I will fight that to the end. So it's about insurance fairness. That local, the not a luxury stuff that was happening in 2015, the local LCD, local coverage determination. Fortunately, that was shelved. And so there was an initiative, which is an LCD Clarification Act, which is basically asking for transparency so that is to come up again, that actual experts in that field are consulted,
Right.
And so, that was going to basically, Medicare was trying to basically the reason that came up is they were trying to, it's not an exaggeration to say they were trying to take prosthetic care back to 1970s technology.
Oh, right.
So, which private insurance companies follow what Medicare does. So it would have affected all of us. I would not be wearing a microprocessor. I would not have a suction socket. I'd have some belt. I'd be limping around. You know what I mean? It's like, why? Like the war is terrible. War is terrible. But unfortunately, war happens. And one positive side effect of that is some of the technology that's been created for so many soldiers that have been losing limbs over the last X amount of years. And that's part of what has contributed to the technology existing for there to be a microprocessor knee and a C leg on its 4th generation that can now even get wet. And I don't have to worry about that. So that kind of stuff is essential. I mean, if there's anything about this conversation that's important, it's that. So I guess you asked, what can people do? Was that what you were saying? What the question was?
I asked what you would include at this point, but same. Yeah. I'll also ask you that later.
Well, the thing is, what I did is that we just went there with a group of people like, hey, here we are in your face. Look at these robot parts, and Brennan and I'm not kidding. House and Senate, we walked miles that day, literally miles. Fortunately, we're able to do that. We were sore at the end of the day and worn out for like a couple of days. But, we're young men and active and more importantly, have access to the prosthetic devices that we need for our bodies. And so, but anybody can call your local folks. I mean, I've been in these offices now. Okay.
Yeah.
There are people who are there to answer the phones, and to take down what you're saying. And they really are,
Absolutely.
And so, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, say what you want about this politician or that politician. And I will keep this specifically to the people that are your state folks that you can actually reach on the phone. You can't call the president and get him on the phone.
Right.
Because a lot of people would like to. But you can get you can get a degree or two of separation away from your state folks. And so, that local coverage the LCD Clarification Act is huge. There's an Insurance Fairness Act, which is huge. And that basically, like, your prosthetist decides what you need.
Right.
We're going to spend less money, we as an American people, on healthcare if we get someone ultimately what they need right away out of the gate, instead of like hemming and hawing about trying to save money on them.
Right.
And then they're falling and hurting themselves. Just get them what they need. Pony up for the microprocessor. And
exactly.
Then get back to work and stimulate the economy. That's what makes America great, is taking care of people. This is the kind of thing we shouldn't have to fight for, and other countries laugh at us about it. So,
they do.
Hot button, man.
Absolutely. I want to piggyback on something you said, though, because just this morning, I called my congressman's office in Washington, D.C., and I spoke to his assistant. And I said, look, I know how he's going to vote, but please tell him to vote this way, and here's why. Yeah. And so, if people will do it, and he did. The guy was very sympathetic and kind, and, a lot of compassion was shown. Even though we may have, he and I may have differences of political view, or at least on insurance, and so I was pleased with that, at least, there was compassion shown. And because I was kind of nervous to call, like, I've never called my congressman before.
Yeah.
So, but it's great. So I recommend if someone has something they want to, like that, call.
And don't be nervous about it, because when you call your congressman, the person that's answering the phone is like a 22-year-old person that's right out of college that is really eager to just try to do good things.
Absolutely.
Or please their boss, if nothing else. Right. So, and their job is to take your call and be sympathetic. And so, and look, even if your congressman, like you said, that they don't necessarily agree with you, you can't control what they're going to do.
Right.
But you did the right thing because you can control what you do. I want you to know that this is how I feel, and here's why. And it's important that you hear my story. So, you do the right thing in spite of the results. You do the right thing because it's the right thing.
Right.
And you can't put a price on that.
Yeah. And that saying, doing the right thing, that's a perfect segue into this. One of the most inspirational stories that I've heard, and not just specifically from Steps of Faith, but just with amputees in general, You guys, you helped a lady named Dana. April 19th, 1995, I think is a day that no American should ever forget, the day of the Oklahoma City bombing. Took the lives of 168 innocent people, injured more than 680 other people. And including the number of those who were killed that day were Dana's mother and her 2 children. And while she survived, we know that because Steps of Faith helped her, she lost a leg in the terrorist attack. Every day I encounter amputees and they complain about how bad their life is. And here's a woman who has suffered through unimaginable loss, who has become a beacon of hope and inspiration in my mind for the entire world. And the positive and life-changing, absolute life-changing impact Steps of Faith has had on Dana was obvious in the video on your website of her. How does it feel for you when you see the positive impact that Steps of Faith Foundation is having on people like Dana?
Wow. Well said. Yeah. I mean, Dana is easy to love. And Dana is me. Dana is you. And again, this is no disrespect to the military. Okay.
Right.
But, when you enter the military and you go into combat, you know that there's a risk, right? Just like being a police officer or whatever. Dana was in a federal building as an American citizen, unfortunately with her entire family, her mother, her sister, and her 2 tiny children. It's just kind of like me getting cancer or anything else. It's like Dana is your neighbor.
Right.
Dana is an everyday hero. And thank God that the veterans get taken care of. People ask us all the time, like, you help a lot of veterans, because you hear about veterans losing limbs. It's like, thankfully, we've never been asked because the government's taking care of them.
Right.
So someone like Dana, has received help throughout the years, but had kind of fallen through the cracks. And so, that story, that's on the website. People can watch that video. How it was the 20 year anniversary of the bombing, and the follow up was on her and her sister, and she's walking terribly in the thing.
Right.
And then I said, she needs a new leg, and maybe someone will help her. And that's where we came in. So my life is better because of Dana, and my life is better because of Steps of Faith. And I, Eric Kinsey, my prosthetist in Nashville, and Rob Pittman, the man who founded the organization and ultimately asked if I would take this position. I mean, he changed my life for the better, and was a true gift that fell from the sky out of nowhere that I didn't see coming when I needed it. Badly. And and not just because I needed a job,
Right.
So I guess to answer your question about how the positive impact feels, I mean, that's one of the incredible. Like when I said my job is incredibly difficult, but also incredibly rewarding. And I mean, like, incredibly rewarding. It's like I don't talk to patients that we help every day on the phone, but when I do, it's usually emotional,
Yeah.
And so, because I get it, I've lived it, I've felt it. I mean, let me be clear. I've not lived all of the circumstances of all these patients. Obviously.
Right.
I had my own circumstances that were horrific, and I'm thankful to have lived through them. Dana was trapped under the rubble.
Yeah.
And that they had to remove her leg in order to get her out to save her life.
Right. There's
photo of her trapped under the rubble.
Yep.
It's like insane. And she's incredible, man. So, I mean, we're 4 years. That was a thing where normally we help people where they are, and it was a whole other, I'll spare you the circumstances, but we brought Dana to us in Nashville and did everything with her leg, kind of from eval to test sockets to out the door over the course of a week. And it was just a really amazing experience. I kind of wish we could do it like that more, just getting to spend that much time with one patient. And it also happened to be, she's just an incredible woman. And as a father,
Right.
kids. And so she actually has a son who's, pardon my math, 20 something, who was, his due date was the 1 year anniversary way back when of the bomb. And they induced her a day early.
Wow.
So that he wouldn't share a birthday with that. Yeah. Alice A. Yeah. He's an incredible family. So yeah, again, sorry for the long answer, but that's maybe I said before it was the most important question about the healthcare stuff, but this might be now. So yeah, I mean, it feels incredible. Look, man, I just feel really lucky. Like I said, I feel lucky that I survived. I feel lucky. I'm just trying to, today I was talking about this with my best friend. I want to try to have more of the 30,000 foot view and not be in the weeds. I'm the kind of guy with the kind of crap that happened to me. I should never be in the weeds.
Right.
I should always have this, I'm floating above everything. Like, it ain't cancer. It ain't the leg. I am lucky.
Right.
Unfortunately, you get bogged down with the day-to-day. Like, as I'm talking to you right now, I'm trying to not look at my phone, and my wife is stressed about something that is legitimate.
Yeah.
That is asking me about, this and that, and just the daily, logistics of life. And so all this to say, point is, I'm very, very lucky to be alive, and I'm very, very lucky to get to do this. And I'm just so lucky that that God brought me to all of this. And so it feels fantastic.
Sure.
All that to say, 10 minutes later, it feels fantastic. And again, I just want to, I feel like people need us, need Steps of Faith, more than ever. Like, I just feel like in a literal sense, people are finding out about us more. We kind of unofficially have a waiting list now because just capacity. We're a small organization. There's one full-time employee, and I have a part-time employee in the other room who's leaving soon, and so I have applications I just haven't even been able to look at yet. And so over the last month or so, we're ahead of schedule with helping people. And I just want to be able to make this a thing that is able to help people. Ultimately, I dream of a world where my job doesn't need to exist.
Right.
But in the short term, unfortunately, it does. And so I want to create an organization that can help people as long as they need help, and help more and more people and anybody that needs it, and really take care of people and really love people and really get people back to their lives. And that can go on and on and on long after I'm gone.
Sure. Right. Yeah. You mentioned having a waiting list. If someone feels like they might need your help, they don't have insurance, or they don't have, whatever they have to pay after their insurance, what are the requirements and qualifications for Steps of Faith to help someone?
Yeah, good question. So our application is on our website, and the main requirements and qualifications, it's a financial situation that also involves an evaluation with a prosthetist. But So someone could be approved for our financial assistance, but not being prosthetist myself, we're the middleman to it, of the whole process. Sure. I connect to the donors that fund what we do. And then I connect the amputees with the people who can really give them the care they need, the prosthetist. And then ultimately we basically pay the prosthetist back for their cost of the parts. These prosthetists are all donating their time, and then we're paying their cost. So our relationship with them is essential.
Okay.
More so than the patients in some ways, because a lot of times there are times where I don't even speak to the patients. We are developing these relationships with the prosthetists, and they're like, I got a patient. He doesn't have insurance, blah, 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 blah. Here's the deal. They send it to us. Bing, bang, boom. It's a shorthand, and we're able to help people that need help right away.
Right. Yeah.
Not saying that the relationship to the patient is important, but my relationship, the service I can do to the patient is get them the prosthetic devices they need. Absolutely. And then so much of that is through the relationship with the prosthetist. So ultimately, primarily, we are helping in what I'm calling phase 1 of Steps of Faith right now. Amputees that have no health insurance or no other way to pay for the devices they need, the prosthetic care they need. Or they have their Jennifer Duncan, the young woman we helped in Waco, Texas, who fell off a bridge after she was hit by a car, holding her 1-year-old baby onto 30 feet below onto concrete, and the baby was unharmed. Wow. She lost her leg. I was able to help her for $14. Wow. That's a whole other story. Yeah. But I feel really lucky. I'm not saying that like, look what we did. I'm saying, no. Look what can happen. Right. Okay. She was denied by prosthetic shops. Come back to us when you have coverage, and charitable organizations. I think it's going to be too expensive. I'm not sure we can help you. I made 2 phone calls and spent $14. Wow. So I say this because Jennifer has Medicaid. She's a 24-year-old single mom. She has Medicaid. In Texas, they don't cover prosthetic care.
Wow.
They do not cover prosthetic care because they don't deem it medically necessary. So,
wow.
Yeah. So we help folks without insurance, or we help folks that, I mean, she might as well not have insurance. She doesn't have insurance that covers prosthetic care. So that's primarily the case, is people like that. It's not there. There are other organizations that are like, do you have health insurance? Well, yeah, but they're like, okay, sorry, we can't help you. Yeah. It's not as black and white as that. It's a little bit case by case, but typically that's the deal.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are some ways that people can give to Steps of Faith to support your mission and the work of the foundation?
Thank you for asking that. People want to help us. They're inspired by what they do. You do not have to be a wealthy person to make a charitable donation. You do not have to feel like you have to donate money that is in the thousands to make a charitable donation that will make an impact. All that to say, you don't have to be rich to help out a charity with your money. So honestly, more than anything, the main way people can help out, stepsoffaithfoundation.org, make a donation. $5, $10, $5,000, $5 million, your call. Yeah. Really, money. It comes down to money. And the way I see it is that there are things that come from that. Back to the people being my passion. You can never have too many friends, and you make friends and you keep them. And I've become such great friends with some people that I did not know who happened to come into my orbit and just want to help us out for whatever reason. So the biggest way people can help out is by donating. And I say that first because it is the biggest need, but also a lot of times what that does is then creates a relationship, and it also changes people's heart. It's like you get people's money involved, they're going to start being real serious about what they're doing. And then, that's a lot of how my board of directors came to be, and these are people who are helping me steer the ship, and really build the organization. So, come to events and tell people about us and, but really it boils down to supporting us financially, whether it's monthly, which you can do via our website very easily, even $5 a month, $10 a month, $100 a month, all that stuff, one-time donations, whatever. People all the time ask like, oh, I'm so inspired by what you do. How can I help? All right, donate, Sure. Full disclosure, I'd given money to charities before I was never, nor am I now, a wealthy person by any means, financially, but I wasn't like I gave to charities regularly, even though I had done it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And tithing at church and that kind of thing. So I think maybe for some people, I don't know, this is just kind of my own guess. It seems like, it's just like, they just don't think of like, I'm not the kind of person that could help a charity. That's wrong.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the thing I want to end on with you today is, what message would you offer to someone who's listening, who maybe they're about to become an amputee, or maybe they've recently become an amputee, and they're asking themselves the question that so many amputees ask, is my life over? What kind of encouragement would you have for that person?
Yeah. Well, it's not over. And, I'm here to tell you that, as long as you're alive, live. I beat the cancer, thank God. And that's gone. And I hope that it never comes back and doesn't come back to my family or anyone I know. But my leg is not growing back. But fortunately, I have this tool that I get to wear that even when it hurts or whatever, allows me to pretty much do what I want and live my life to thrive. And sure. So the short answer is, I'm about to get out of here. The short answer is, see, someone's coming in this room now, as long as you are alive, live your life. It doesn't end with amputation. I met my wife, my beautiful wife, after I'd lost my leg. I had my children after I'd lost my leg and finished chemo and all that stuff. And I've done a lot of things that, I think people think are cool or whatever. Some of the things you talked about, playing music and, whatever, all of these things, that's cool. But the coolest thing is I also get to live in a 2-story house where I'm able to walk downstairs and feed my kids and walk upstairs with my kids. You know what I mean? And so it gets better. It gets better. It's amazing that our that we're really lucky to live in an age where the technology is what it is, which is why access to what we need is so essential. That, it's not the Civil War. In spite of what presidents may or may not have been around when the Civil War happened.
Right.
Topical. But little history lesson there would do anybody good. But
sure.
That's bipartisan.
Yeah.
But we're lucky to live in the age we live in, and more so, we're lucky that wherever you are on the spiritual spectrum, that God is good, and
Amen.
That life is a gift, and that the fact that I was able to lose a part of my body that I was made to walk with, and that my body was able to heal, and then again, human beings have the brilliance and the technology to make these tools that I can wear that and do the same thing, even though it's not part of my body.
Right.
Praise God. We're just really lucky, we're just really lucky. I feel like I am really lucky, and it gets better.
Yeah.
Don't give up hope. It gets better. That's what I would say.
I've been talking with Billy Brimblecom Jr., the Executive Director, Steps of Faith Foundation. For more information about Steps of Faith or to make a donation to them, please visit their website, www.stepsoffaithfoundation.org. Check them out on Twitter at Moving Amputees and on Facebook and Instagram at Steps of Faith Foundation. Billy, I appreciate you taking time out of your day to join me on Amp Life today. It's been a great experience.
Brian, this has been a real pleasure, man. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's been awesome talking to you. Fantastic questions. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Bill. I appreciate it. You've been listening to Amp Life, the #1 podcast for amputees, hosted by an amputee, and brought to you by Dilatory Orthotics and Prosthetics, located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. If you enjoyed today's episode, leave us a review on iTunes or give us a like on Facebook. I'm the Brian Moe. I invite you to visit our website, www.amplifepodcast.com, or check us out on Facebook at Amp Life Podcast.